percentile scale with written definitions of the score choices. Here are some examples of the kind of items that we use on it. When you don't understand a paragraph that you've just read, can you clarify it by careful rereading? Again, we created originally these items in 5 different areas: reading, studying, test preparation, note taking, and a right judgment. And we use the standard Bangor type of scale, 1 to 100%. The idea that we was that we wanted to demanding test of self-regulation. So we created the items so that the student or whoever responded had to change the negative result to make positive things happening. So to me, that's one of the characteristics of self-regulation, is the ability to read our own feedback, be able to make adjustments. And we wanted to get into their sense of confidence about doing that. In that first study that we conducted, we also had some measures of a teacher scale for self-regulation. These have been around since late 1980, and a scale that's been shown to be reliable. And it deals with items such as the following. It shows the students select the detailed information regarding grade evaluation of schoolwork. To the point where we thought that these were items that teachers would be able to see in classrooms, so that would be reasonable inferences that regulation occurred. And we see the kind of response options that we have here. It's a multi-point scale, a 5-point scale, and the stability on alpha was 0.95. In the first study, we also were interested in collecting information about homework, and we developed a scale that involves some quality and quantity items, such as how much time do you spend on homework every day, the quality of the homework as well in terms of prioritization, for example. We also developed another scale so that we wanted to scale kind of a companion to the self, which we view as a kind of a measure of self-reflection. We're interested in how much responsibility that a student would assign compared to the influence of the teacher. Hello, Claire Ellen.
Sorry, Barry.
The responsibility scale had a kind of unusual choice format because it gave us a series of items such as who is more responsible for learning for a student interested in school. And they had a choice then to rank this either for being completely the teacher's responsible, completely the student's responsible, and then a number of points in between. We predicted that students who were behind self-regulatory efficacy were more willing to take responsibility for adverse results. That's what we developed it. So the participants in the first study were virtually the entire student body of all girls pro high school in New York City. As you can see, it was multi-ethnic in its nature, and it involved students who were both ninth all the way through the 8th grade. And our key point here is that this was a school where homework that was highly valued as part of our curriculum, and students at least 3 hours a night. So we wanted to see how they would respond to these items, because the hope is that the self-skills that were developed would be predictive of homework. The next screen were the reliabilities of the skills that we used, and you can see that they're universally very designed. The lowest one was the homework quantitative scale, which involved just a couple of items. I thought it was reasonable. The results from the jitter study, we did an exploratory factor analysis to find out about the setting up. Originally it involved 59 items. 2 items did load on the first factor, but it was essentially a single factor scale. It's accounted for 63% of the variance, and all loadings were greater than 0.60 on that factor. and the scale was very reliable, according to Cross Alpha. In terms of the evidence of validity, this is a published effort, so if any of you want references to it, I can provide those. The self-regulated 0.72 with teacher rates of self-regulation in all class. It's also correlated with the quality of homework and the quantity of homework. So they're all fairly large correlation. The self-regulated 0.7 with students' responsibility, as we had hoped, and the correlated 0.68 with grade point average. So a summary of the findings was that self was highly reliable. So the girls' response to the self were highly correlated with the girl teacher ratings of the girls over overt self-regulation classes. Their homework quality and quantity was correlated with the scores and the GPA. The major limitation of this first study was that it was conducted only with girls. That it was conducted in a high-power school that emphasized more than 3 hours of homework in the evening. And some students complained that this involved redundancy because we're creating items to sort of parallel within each of those 5 areas. And the psychometric structure of the study, the unit factorial, seems to suggest a shorter version of just fact and this are more or less shorter. And this is the goal of our second study. So the question of study number 2 is what was the reliability and the validity of self with a college-age population of both genders, because we only had girls. Is the self useful factorial with college students, or is it a multifactorial scale? What is the effectiveness of a long version of the scale versus a short version? And how much predictive advantage does the self and the academic responsibility scales have for traditional admissions measures how students apt to learning in college? So, for departure again, were 228 college students, primarily European extraction, but ethnicity, African and Hispanic ethnicity. Majority were undergraduates, and the percentage in each of the categories with our and you can see the range of GPA was fairly wide. And in the study, we also included the team measure as well as a grade point. Their grade is education psychology course is a dependent measure. We used most of the measures that we learned that we had used in the first study. The self perceived academic responsibilities scale, measure homework quality and quantity measures, and the rating of student self-regulated learning, the teacher scale. It was the short version of the self developed by selecting 6 or 7 ideas from each of 3 areas and just academic skill, studying, preparation, and note writing. We decided to figure out reading and deciding. It didn't emerge in separate tests. The criterion for item selection from the long version was really just face familiarity. We wanted to so people from those 3 years we took the items that we thought sampled it most were comprehensively and were the clearest. And it turned out that there were 19 items on the scale. The scale also proved to be very reliable, according to Cross Alpha. Okay, so the reliability measures for the second study are, as you can see, are again very strong across the measures, including the teacher rating measure. Along the version of the fact itself was factor analyzed to see if we used the principal components to see if it was a unifactor with parallel as the students got older, whether there was any differentiation. And it turned out also to be a single factor scale. All loading on the first sector exceeded 6 levels. You can see that it's loading on a fairly heavily on that minimum factor. And so there was no gender differences among this college students, so that answers that part of the question. The next thing was to compare the predictive validity of the long version versus the short version of the scale. And we had hoped, basically, when we did this, that if we would get comparable scores, they wouldn't be different because of the product or scale. We were surprised with what happened. As you can see, for example, in the correlation for the grade in educational psychology, the short version was higher than it was for the long version, and it was statistically significant. The same is true for the responsibility scale, the teacher's regulated learning scale, those not the SAT. Were equally predicted by both long and the short version. Homework quality was predicted significantly better, and homework quantity. It's surprising. The self-scale is shortened on the basis of judgments of faith and validity and rather than on the basis of empirical criteria. However, the culling of the best hands from the long version enhanced the predictive power of the short version. And of course, the advantage of only requiring about a third of the time to filter out. So that's evident for students, and it's also those students who complained about their first version being redundant. They spared that. Okay, we also wanted to check now to see what would be the predictive power of these self-measures, and we wanted to compare it against one of the traditional predictors, which is the SAT. This now basically gives you a regression analysis, and what you can see from this is in this hierarchical analysis, in the first step, where SATs were entered, 11 explained about 11% of the variance steps. In the second step, where the self added to the SAT, it accounted for 35% of the variance. And when we added deep responsibility, it added another 2% to the variance. So again, what it showed out here was this relatively short scale was predicting find the course grades better than SAT. And really that interesting for us. So what does this mean? Where do we go next? We were interested in how does the self and academic responsibility scale compare with establishment measures of self-regulation, as well as a new measure of self-regulation that was recently called self-discipline scale. The latter question will be the third study that I'm describing you just finished. We chose basically the MSLQ because it is widely used as a solutionary measure of mark regulations, and so it's sort of almost the upper variable in terms of which we wanted to see where our scores would come out. It's 81 scale rating, and you can see the rating is a 7-point rating scale. Test includes items such as when I take tests, I think about the consequences of the clearly, or I structure to clarify concepts. And it's proven to be a reliable school. It's been used for a number of years. Next, we thought we should compare the predicted validity of the short version of the self and the with responsibility measures, which is a construct that helped emerge recently called self-discipline. The authors of that study, Keyworth and Silligus, have advocated this new construct. And they acknowledge that similar new construct is similar to what has been called in the literature self-control. And they find self-discipline as the ability to suppress potent responses in the service of a higher goal, and specifying that such a choice is not automatic but requires conscious effort. So what they're hypothesizing is that the learner's personal control of lower skills such as attention, control, and improvement.